What's up, Kuddle Kingdom? It's your boy. Today, I'm going over my Omnath Locus of Rage deck profile. To start off, Omnath Locus of Rage is a legendary elemental creature. 5/5 for 3 colorless, 2 red, 2 green, and its effect is as follows. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 5/5 green and red elemental creature token onto the battlefield. And whenever Omnath Locus of Rage or another elemental you control dies, deal 3 damage to target creature or player. So the goal of the deck is to try to bring out Omnath as fast as humanly possible with our many land ramping spells, and continue land ramping when Omnath is out in order to spam 5/5 elementals on the board. And we have a kind of a failsafe here. If somehow our opponent blows up our board or something, for each of those elementals on the board, it will deal 3 damage, which doesn't seem a lot at first, but that will rack up really quick, especially if there are a lot of elementals on the board. Now, without further ado, let's get to the deck profile. Starting off is our other landfall cards. Zendikar Royal, Skewed Swarm, Rampaging Beasts, and Tatiana, Protector of Argoth. Now, these 4 cards are all landfall cards, which means they do an additional... They trigger their effect when a land enters the battlefield. Zendikar Royal puts a 2/2 elemental creature on the board. Skewed Swarm makes a 1/1 insect, but if you control 6 or more lands, make a copy of Skewed Swarm, so that will start multiplying really quick. Rampaging Beloths makes a 4/4 green beast creature, and Tatiana's the weird one here because its landfall ability only triggers if a land is put from the graveyard onto the battlefield, but that's okay because we have ways to recover land from the graveyard. And it makes a 5/3 green elemental creature token. As for our non-swarming landfall effects, we have Locust Cobra and Tireless Provisioner. They both kind of do the same thing, where Locust Cobra makes a floating mana of any color, while Tireless Provisioner lets me make a food or treasure token. You will probably make a treasure token. Not really into the food tokens. Now, surprisingly, that is all of our additional landfall effects. Now moving on to the actual mana ramping. Farseek and Rampant Growth are both for 2 mana. Search a land card and place them onto the battlefield. Rampant Growth is basic land, while Farseek is a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card. For 3 mana, I run Nisa's Pilgrimage, Kodama's Reach, and Cultivate. Cultivate and Kodama's Reach do the same thing. Search 2 lands, put 1 on the battlefield, put 1 on the hand. While Nisa's Pilgrimage is the same thing, but with a spell mastery, which is if there are 2 or more instants or sorceries in the graveyard, search for 3 basic forests, put 2 of them into your hand, 1 on the battlefield. So a little bit of extra bonus if you have sorcery spells in the graveyard. And then for 4 mana, we run Circuitous Route, Migration Path, Explosive Vegetation, and Sky Shroud Claim. Circuitous Route and Explosive Vegetation are essentially the same card. However, Circuitous Route searches a gate, but I don't have gates in here. Migration Path is basically Explosive Vegetation, search 2 basic lands, put them on the battlefield, but it has cycling in addition to that effect. And Sky Shroud Claim searches for specifically forests, but they come in untapped, which does come in handy. Very handy. For a 5 mana cost, I have Nisa's Expedition, but it has Convoke. And it does the same thing. Search 2 basic lands, shuffle. Nisa's Renewal, shout out. Search your basic library for 3 lands and gain 7 life. Reshape the Earth. It's a little expensive for 6 colorless and 3 green, but it's worth it for 10. Search 10 lands and put them on the battlefield. Lands, not just basics, lands. Any lands, kind of busted. We also run Roiling Regrowth and Harrow. Sack a land, search 2 lands and put them on the battlefield. For double the Omnath triggers. Crop Rotation for 1, sack a land, search a land, any land. And for the more unique ones, Splendid Reclamation. Return all lands from your graveyard onto the battlefield. We do have a lot of ways to sacrifice lands, and the lands itself do sacrifice themselves, so bringing them back onto the field is a huge, very, very huge. And Scape Shift. Sack any number of lands you control, search your library for that many lands, and put them on the battlefield. Tapped. Those are all the instants and sorceries that search lands, but now for the creatures that search lands. Sakura Tribe Elder for 2. Burnish Heart for 3, with the ability for 3 mana and sack it. Search 2 basic lands. Spring Bloom Druid. When it enters the battlefield, sack a land, search 2 lands. And for the last land searcher of the deck, we do run 1 Elvish Reclaimer. For 2 mana and tap it, sack a land, search a land. Put on the battlefield tapped. That is all the ways we search our lands from the decks. All of these are how we keep searching lands. And that's how we keep triggering our Omnath effects. We just keep spamming the balls. Keep spamming those elementals. Now, that's not the only way we can continue on, playing lands. We also have other cards that allow us to play an additional land onto the field. And those are just as important. To start off, Arboreal Grazer. When it enters the battlefield, put a land from your hand to the battlefield tapped. A good 1-drop early play to play a land on the field. And even in late game, you could just play it, put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. And then we run a bunch of cards that allow us to play multiple lands per turn. Scaled Herbalist. Tap it, put a land from your hand to the battlefield. Mina and Den Wildborn. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, and then for a red and a green, return a land you control to its owner's hand. Target creature gets trampled until end of turn. Not really. That ability will occasionally pop up. Just returning a land to your hand is nice because you could just replay it. And giving a creature trample is not really that big of a deal in this deck, but it's okay. Druid class, whenever you play a land, you gain a life, and then if you level it up, you can play an additional land on each of your turn. We never really level it to 3, but it's alright. And then Dryad of the Island Grove, play an additional land. All lands you control are every basic land in addition to every type. And Azazel Lost But Seeking, you may play 2 additional lands on your turn, which is very nice. Because keep in mind, playing an additional land will also include being able to play them from the graveyard. Incoming with these specific creatures, which will help boost, as mentioned earlier, how our lands do sack themselves. So bringing them back from the graveyard is important. Thus, we run the 1 Ranrep Excavator, playing an additional land. You may play lands from your graveyard. Ancient Green Warden, one of the best cards in the deck, which also allows you to play lands from your graveyard. But in addition to that, if a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, and it triggers an additional time. So Omnath gets a double trigger, Look, all of those landfall guards get a double trigger. It's very, very powerful. And not as good as these two, but I do run the one Scare Tiller, where if it becomes tapped, you may play a land from your graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. Because recycling lands is that good in this deck. Last kind of land related card. Escape to the Wilds. Exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may play exile cards this way until the end of your next turn, and you may play additional land this turn. So if you banish a land, you can play it, and it also gives you some consistency in being able to play additional cards. However, Escape to the Wilds is not the only card that allows us to play, allow us to continue on with card advantage. For draw spells, you will run out of cards really quick in your hand, especially if you have a lot of mana and nothing to do with it. Because you're just going to be playing lands to trigger Omnath abilities. Although you don't really need more cards to play, you just need lands to keep playing. It's also good to have additional card advantage if you have that much mana just sitting there. So we run the Harmonize for 3 mana, draw 3 cards. Momentous Fall, sack a creature, you draw cards equal to its power, gain life equal to its toughness. Also, if Omnath is on the field, sacrificing a creature will count as it dying, so you can deal 3 damage to whatever you want. This one is nice. Shamanic Revelation. Draw a card for each creature you control, and gain 4 life for each creature you control that's over 4 power or greater. Insane. You will have a lot of elementals on the field, and all of them are probably going to be over 5, and you will heal a lot from that. Life's Legacy. Sack a creature, draw equal to its power. Almost the same as Momentous Fall, but it's a sorcery instead of an instant. And that is our sorceries and instances that draw. But we also have draw power in the forms of permanence. One of my favorites, Garruk's Uprising. If you control a creature of power 4 or greater, draw a card. Creature you control have trample. Very nice for going through those pesky, annoying chunk blockers that are your 1/1s blocking the big 5/5s you have. And whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield, draw a card, which essentially turns into whenever you play a land, draw a card, which becomes absolutely insane. Because you play a land, you get a 5/5 elemental, draw a card. Absolutely insane. Not as good, but still really powerful. Elemental Bond. Whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield, draw your card. Greater Good. Sacrifice the creature, draw equal to the power, and discard 3 cards. Again, sacrificing a creature will count as the creature dying, so Omnath will be able to just deal 3 damage to a creature or player. And trying out this card, Dragonborn Champion. Whenever a source you control deals 5 or more damage to a player, draw a card. Whenever an elemental or Omnath himself is able to deal damage to an opponent, you get to draw a card. Very powerful. That is all of our draw spells. Now moving on to some miscellaneous effects that are just really good in this deck. Second Harvest. For each token you control, create a token that's a copy of that permanent. Basically double all your elementals. Very nice. Natural Order. Sack a green creature. Search your library for a green creature card. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Sacrificing an elemental is not a big deal at all, especially if you have a lot of them with all the land ramping we run. So sacrificing it and then putting like an Evergreen Warden or a Nazus onto the field, replacing it with whatever you want from the deck, very big deal to able to enhance your play. And also on the same line as Natural Order, Magus of the Order. For a green and tap it, sack it, search another green creature, put it onto the battlefield. Again, searching Evergreen Warden would be really great. Or if you already have them on the board, finding something like an Azusa to play 2 additional lands, very powerful. Some more funny cards to run. Double cast. When you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. Being able to copy something like a reshape the earth would be funny. I haven't been able to pull that off yet. Or something like explosive vegetation or Nisa's expedition, doubling those land triggers for just 2 mana. It's very nice. Another funny card, a Black Blade Reforged. Being able to completely kill someone with commander damage as Omnath is very funny. So I just run it. Ferocity of the Wilds. Attacking non-human creatures get +1/+0 and have trample. So each of your elementals turn into a 6/5 with trample. Very nice. And if that wasn't enough, Where the Ancients Tread. Whenever a creature with 5 or more power enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Where the Ancients Tread deal 5 damage to target creature or player. So every time you play a land, ping someone or some creature for 5. And War Storm Surge, kind of the same thing, but instead of whenever a creature with 5 or greater enters the battlefield, deal 5 damage, it's whenever a creature enters the battlefield, ping the amount of damage equal to its power to any target. Very nice. Now for some removal spells. Beast Within. Destroy target permanent. Its control puts a 3/3 green beast. Can destroy anything. Target permanent. So you can destroy a land. You can destroy an artifact, pesky enchantment, or a pesky creature. Replace it with a 3/3 green beast. Corrosive Grip. Split second. Cannot be responded to. And destroy target artifact or enchantment. Broken Bond, destroy artifact or enchantment, play a land from your hand onto the battlefield to trigger your Omnath. Dire Strain Rampage, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. If a land was destroyed this way, its controller may search for up to 2 basic lands, put them on the battlefield, and shuffle. Otherwise, this controller may search for 1 basic land. And it has Flashback. You can use this to destroy something your opponent controls, or you can use this to destroy one of your own lands and play 2 lands from your deck to trigger your Omnath twice. Kaluth's Will. Choose one if you control your commander to cast this spell. You may choose both. Deals X creature damage to each creature without flying, so a board wipe, and you can destroy X target artifacts or enchantments. Late game, this will come in handy because you can just blow up the board, including your own. Hopefully the enemy doesn't have any flying, but even if it doesn't, you can still ping them to death if your elementals die. Along the same lines, Savage Twister deals X damage to each creature, where X is equal to the mana you spent to it, -2. So you can choose to deal 4 damage to keep your elementals alive, or you can choose to do a lot of damage and try to clear out the entire board. Storm's Wrath. Deal 4 damage to each creature and planeswalker. Your elementals will still live because they are 5/5s and will live by 1. But you can wipe anything that's below 1. And Blasphemous Act. Costs 1 less for each creature on the battlefield. Deal 13 damage to each creature. Kind of a board wipe for everything 13 and under. And with the board wipe comes damage with Omnath. And the last of our non-land cards are just some things to get Omnath out quicker. Soul Ring. Heraldic Banner is nice because you can pick any color. And your elementals will gain +1/+0. And Goblin Archaeomancer, because each spell that's red or green costs 1 less. Now for our lands. As mentioned earlier, our lands do sacrifice themselves in order to bring out more lands. Let's start off with some that tap for no color. Field of Ruin. Taps for colorless, and for 2 2 tap and sack it. Destroy a target non-basic land an opponent controls. Each player searches for a basic land and put it on the battlefield, including yourself. So, extra land. And destroy an opponent's pesky land. I don't know what land would be pesky that an opponent would have, but like maybe their command tower. Maybe it's a 5-color deck and they really need that command tower and you could just destroy it, but they can just search land, so whatever. Warp Landscape. Search your library for 2 and sack it. Search for a basic land, put it on the battlefield. Again, you can sack it to search for another land and get another trigger off of Omnath. Myriad Landscape comes in tapped. Taps for a colorless, and for 2 and sack it, search your library for 2 basic lands that share a land type, put it onto the battlefield tapped. So this one searches for 2 basic lands, and they have to be of the same type, and it triggers Omnath twice. And Blighted Woodland does not come in tapped, taps for a colorless, and for 3 and a green, sack it, search for 2 basic lands and put them on the battlefield tapped. 2 lands. So again, sack it, search for 2 lands, trigger Omnath. Next, we have the Panoramas, and I run each of the ones that I can run in this deck. Jund Panorama, Bant Panorama, Naya Panorama, and Grixis Panorama. They all do the same thing, kind of, where they tap for a colorless, and for 1 and tap it, sack it, search for a land within those colors, the guild colors. Jund and Naya allows you to search for both green and red. However, Bant only lets you search for green, and Grixis only lets you search for red. Regardless, they're still really good cards to have. And for the last Scragglers, Mountain Valley comes in tapped. Sack it, search for a mountain or forest, put on the battlefield, set for your library. Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse do the same things. Tap and sack it, search a basic land, put it on the battlefield, taps, shuffle your library. And the Chad version of it, Fabled Passage, tap and sack it, search for library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, but if you control 4 or more lands, untap it. Very nice. And the last 2 non-basic lands, Gruul Turf and Guildless Commons. They are what I call bounce lands. They tap for 2 mana. However, when you play them, you have to return a land from your field on the field back to your hand. What I like to do is if I have a card on the field that allows me to play multiple lands, such as Azusa, Mina and Den, stuff like that, I just play the Gruul Turf, trigger the Omnath trigger to make an elemental, and then I bounce itself back to my hand, and I could just keep playing it, bouncing it back to my hand to just keep... So I won't continuously need to play lands, and they just sit on the battlefield. Nice recyclable land triggers. I know I keep saying last non-basic, but there's one more. Lair of the Hydra. If you control 2 or more lands, it comes in tapped. Taps for a green, and then for a green and X, it becomes an XX green Hydra creature. Late game, you will have a lot of mana with not a lot to do with it. So if you just spend it on Lair of the Hydra, it just becomes a really big creature, and that's just really nice. Lastly, to round off our deck, we run... I actually don't know from the top of my head. I think it's 12 and 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12. Yep. We run 12 forests and 8 mountains. Now, it's important to keep track of how many basic lands you run in this deck. Like, I know I run 20 because I did run into a problem where I would cast the spells like, Explosive Vegetation, where it tells me to search for a basic land, and I run out of basic land, so I just tap the mana for no reason and stuff like that. So keeping track of that is nice. And that rounds off our 99 for our Omnath Locus of the Rage deck. I hope you enjoy. Ya boys, signing out.